Students, today we are going to discuss about certain motifs and symbols used by Atwood in her novel Surfacing. We see that throughout Surfacing, certain motifs are used to build important themes and provide imagery that reflects and connects the narrator's fragmented memory and identity. Number one is language. The motive of language helps to build the theme of separation versus wholeness. It draws on the fact that language can separate people when they do not know each other's language or when they use words to lie and hurt. The narrator grew up in northern Quebec, an area where two distinct cultures coexist, one French speaking and another English speaking. Although the majority of the people in the town speak only French, the narrator speaks English and a bit of little a little bit of school French, but not the dialect spoken in Quebec. And because of this, the narrator grew up feeling different and alienated from other children, unable to build friendships. And as an adult, she continues to find language and words to be a barrier between people. I quote from the text: language divides us into fragments. I wanted to be whole. Unquote. In contrast, she admires the animals who have no language. Language is a human invention and is associated in the narrator's mind with the bad parts of being human, like violence, destruction, suffering, and war. So, for a time in the novel, she gives up language, living as an animal, and rejecting the human part of herself. Then, another motive is of severed body parts. This is one of the most prominent recurring images in the novel. Heads separated from bodies on coins, women's dresses with no heads atop them in her childhood scrapbook, a one handed woman are just a few of the many images sprinkled throughout the novel. These smaller examples support a larger and more meaningful one. The narrator feeling her head has somehow become separated from her body, separated from herself. She cannot feel emotions or recall events correctly. Her inability to remember the events of the recent past correctly and her inability to feel love for Joe are both attributed to this division between head and body. Ultimately, the severed body parts all come to represent the narrator's feelings about her abortion, which she characterizes as the loss of an actual part of her body. Then another motive is of random samples. Uh, the Random Samples is a short film on which the two male characters, the major characters of the novel, David and Joe, are working on. The nature of this film supports the theme of separation versus wholeness again, and it is made up of random shots that are not connected in a meaningful way and are often just whatever strikes David as being weird or bizarre. The random samples captured on camera juxtapose fish guts, a dead heron, a house made of bottles, and similar other images, but they do not have a meaning or pattern. Lacking any cohesion, the random samples are similar to the parts of the narrator's self and memory. Her thinking self is separate from her feeling self. Her memories are disjointed and lack meaning. These parts need connections that tie them together in order to have meaning. Then another motif is of paintings. In the novel, paintings support the theme of natural versus artificial and give the reader glimpses into the confusion within the narrator's mind. The narrator is an illustrator, and as she has brought her work with her to the cabin, but whenever she tries to work, the figures do not turn out as she intends. A giant looks instead like a football player. A princess looks stupefied rather than filled with wonder. These difficulties in rendering an accurate portrayal of characters from the folk tales reflects the narrator's difficulties in rendering her own self from her memories. Other paintings become important to the story as well, and they also fail to reflect reality. Her father's drawings of the rock paintings lead the narrator to believe he had gone insane. Later, they become part of a delusion that her father left his research as clues to lead her to the sacred place where she could find truth. Apart from these motifs, there are certain symbols also, like water. The title of the novel Surfacing suggests itself as an overall metaphor for the emotional journey of the narrator. She dives into her subconscious, into her memories, into her pain, her grief, her delusions. She surfaces again, then, having put the parts of her whole self together. The dive, the plunge she takes to the bottom of the lake symbolically represents the emotional work she must do to face her feelings about her abortion and about her parents' lives and deaths. So, the water, and in particular the lake, function as an important symbol of the narrator's subconscious, in which she has buried or submerged painful memories and into which she must go to find healing. Then, another important symbol is of the dead heron. On the way to find one of the rock paintings, the narrator sees a dead heron hanging by its feet from a tree. She knows that herons are not good for food, so there is no good reason to kill them. She assumes Americans killed it since they are known to kill even without reason. However, the man who killed the heron turned out to be a Canadian, and this shocks the narrator. She is disturbed by her inability to tell the difference between Canadians and Americans, and she worries that the American influence will end up being too strong for Canadian culture to resist. Thus, this dead heron comes to symbolize both the passive victimhood of Canadian culture and the destructive American influence. And then there is another important symbol that is of a barometer couple. The wooden barometer couple, a quaint husband and wife, seen in Paul and Madam's home, becomes a symbol of the forces that keep relationships together. At first, they seem to represent Paul and Madam. The narrator remarks on how Paul and Madam are just like carvings. As the novel progresses, they come to symbolize all the reasons couples stay together. As the narrator comes to realize there are a variety of different bonds between couples, and love is not necessarily the only one or even the strongest one. Like for David and Anna's relationship seems based on mutual hatred, or at least a mutual struggle for power. And the protagonist's own parents seemed to share a bond they found in rejecting society together. Until the final moments of the story, her relationship with Joe seems stable only as long as it doesn't stray into the realm of emotion and simply remains a convenient sexual outlet for both of them. The barometer couple is ultimately any couple that is bound together for any reason. So these are certain motifs and symbols which Atwood has used in her novel Surfacing, and this increases the meaning and the depth of the novel. So that's all, student, for today. Thank you.